My name is Amanda Rodriguez. I'm 29 years old, and I thought my wedding day would be the most beautiful moment of my life until my mother-in-law grabbed the microphone during our reception and announced that it was her special day too. What she did next left 150 guests speechless and taught me exactly where I stood in my new family. Before I tell you how one announcement turned my dream wedding into a nightmare, and how the truth about who paid for everything finally silenced an entire ballroom, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Please hit that like button and subscribe if you want to hear how 3 words from our wedding planner exposed the most selfish act I've ever witnessed. Let me take you back to where this story really begins. I met David Torres 3 years ago at a marketing conference in Denver. I was 26, working as a marketing manager for a growing tech startup, and he was 31, a software developer with his own consulting business. The attraction was immediate. His easy smile, quick wit, and genuine kindness made him stand out in a room full of networking professionals. Our relationship developed naturally over long-distance calls and weekend visits. I lived in Phoenix, building my career and enjoying my independence in a 1-bedroom apartment downtown. David lived in Albuquerque, close to his family and his established client base. We made it work, taking turns visiting each other and dreaming about a future together. The challenge, I quickly learned, was David's family, specifically his mother, Patricia Torres. At 58, Patricia was a force of nature, a retired elementary school principal who had raised 4 children as a single mother after David's father died when David was 12. She was strong, opinionated, and accustomed to being the center of her children's universe. David was the baby of the family and Patricia's clear favorite. His 3 older sisters, Maria, Sophia, and Carmen, had all married and moved away, leaving David as Patricia's primary source of attention and companionship. They had dinner together twice a week, she had a key to his house, and she was involved in every major decision he made. When David first introduced me to Patricia, the reception was politely cold. She smiled, asked appropriate questions about my job and family, and maintained perfect manners throughout the weekend visit. But I could sense the underlying tension. I was an outsider threatening the special relationship she had with her youngest son. Over the next 2 years, Patricia's behavior toward me followed a consistent pattern. In David's presence, she was cordial and welcoming. When he left the room, her tone would shift subtly. Small comments about my career ambitions, my decision to live so far from family, my lack of cooking skills compared to the girls David grew up with. "It's just her way," David would say when I mentioned these interactions. "Mom's protective of all of us. She'll warm up once she gets to know you better." But she never did warm up. If anything, Patricia seemed to view my relationship with David as a temporary phase he would eventually outgrow. She frequently mentioned local women who were still single and would be perfect for David. She talked about grandchildren she hoped to have someday when David finds the right girl to settle down with. The passive aggression escalated when David and I got engaged 18 months ago. I was visiting for Easter weekend when David proposed during a family hike in the Sandia Mountains. It was perfect, intimate, meaningful, and exactly what I had hoped for. Patricia's reaction was telling. She hugged David enthusiastically, tears in her eyes as she told him how proud she was. When she turned to me, the hug was brief and the smile didn't reach her eyes. "Welcome to the family, dear," she said, but her tone suggested this was more obligation than celebration. The wedding planning process became a battlefield. Patricia had strong opinions about everything: the venue, the date, the guest list, the menu, even my dress. She framed her suggestions as family traditions or what would make David happiest, but her real message was clear: I was doing everything wrong. "The Torres family has always had their weddings at St. Anthony's," she announced during our first planning meeting. "It's where David was baptized, where his father's funeral was held. It would mean so much to the family." I had already put a deposit on a beautiful outdoor venue in Phoenix, closer to my family and friends. Changing would mean losing the deposit and moving the wedding to a city where most of my guests would need to travel. "Mom," David intervened gently, "Amanda and I chose the Phoenix venue together. It's important to her family too." Patricia's smile was tight. "Of course, dear. I just thought David might want to honor his family traditions." This became her standard approach, framing every disagreement as me pulling David away from his family, his traditions, his roots. When I chose a Mexican fusion menu that reflected both our heritages, she suggested traditional New Mexican dishes would be more authentic. When I selected a mariachi band for cocktail hour, she mentioned that David's cousin had a lovely country band that played all the family gatherings. The guest list became particularly contentious. Patricia wanted to invite dozens of distant relatives and family friends I had never met. When I explained that our venue had capacity limits and we needed to keep the list manageable, she accused me of being unwelcoming to David's extended family. "I suppose your fancy venue is more important than including the people who love David," she said during one particularly tense planning session. David tried to mediate, but he was caught between his mother's expectations and his fiancé's vision for our wedding. I found myself compromising on almost everything to keep the peace, while Patricia made no concessions whatsoever. The most challenging aspect was the financial dynamic. I was paying for the wedding myself, a decision I had made early in the planning process. My marketing job paid well. I had been saving for years, and I wanted the independence of creating our dream wedding without financial obligations to either family. The total budget was 35,000, not extravagant by modern standards, but significant enough to represent a major financial commitment. I covered the venue, catering, photography, flowers, music, and all the details that would make our day special. Patricia never offered to contribute financially, which was fine with me, but she seemed to resent my financial independence, making comments about couples who think expensive weddings make marriages better, and all this money that could be better spent on a house down payment. Despite the tensions, I was determined to create a beautiful day that honored both families. I included Patricia in every major decision, sought her input on details that mattered to her, and tried to bridge the gap between her vision and mine. 3 weeks before the wedding, Patricia made an announcement that should have been a red flag. "I have some exciting news to share," she told David and me during a family dinner. "Harold Brennan has been asking me out for months, and I finally said yes." Harold was a 62-year-old widower from Patricia's church, a kind man who had been pursuing her for over a year. Patricia had always insisted she wasn't ready to date, that her focus was on her children and grandchildren. "Mom, that's wonderful," David said, genuinely happy for her. "Harold's a good man. Dad would have liked him." I agreed enthusiastically. "This is such great news, Patricia. You deserve to be happy." But something in her expression made me uneasy. There was a secretive quality to her smile, as if she had more news she wasn't sharing. "We're taking things slowly," she continued, "getting to know each other properly. But I wanted you both to know." The conversation moved on to wedding details, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Patricia was planning something. Her sudden openness to dating, just weeks before our wedding, seemed suspiciously timed. The week of our wedding was a whirlwind of final preparations. My family arrived from Phoenix, David's sisters flew in from their respective cities, and our friends gathered for the celebration we had been planning for over a year. Patricia seemed different that week, more energetic, more excited than I had seen her throughout the entire engagement. She was constantly on her phone, making mysterious calls and texting frequently. When asked about it, she would smile and say she was just coordinating some surprises for the happy couple. The wedding day itself was perfect from the start. The weather was beautiful, the venue looked stunning, and our photographer captured every moment flawlessly. Getting ready with my bridesmaids that morning, I felt truly happy and optimistic about beginning this new chapter with David. The ceremony was everything I had dreamed of. David looked handsome in his navy suit, my dress felt perfect, and our vows brought tears to nearly everyone's eyes. Even Patricia seemed genuinely emotional during the ceremony, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. The cocktail hour flowed seamlessly into dinner, with guests mingling, enjoying the mariachi music, and celebrating our marriage. The food was delicious, the flowers were gorgeous, and the energy in the room was joyful and warm. It was during dinner that I first noticed Patricia acting strangely. She was seated at the family table near the head table, but she kept checking her phone and looking toward the entrance. At one point, I saw her excuse herself and walk quickly toward the lobby. "Everything okay with your mom?" I asked David during a brief moment between greeting tables. "She seems fine," he replied, though he looked puzzled. Maybe she's just emotional about the wedding. The reception was scheduled to begin with our first dance, followed by parent dances and then open dancing for all guests. Our DJ, Miguel, was a consummate professional who had managed dozens of weddings and knew how to keep the energy flowing. David and I had just finished our first dance to At Last by Etta James, and the crowd was applauding when Patricia approached the DJ station. I watched from the dance floor as she spoke urgently to Miguel, gesturing toward the microphone. Miguel looked confused and shook his head, but Patricia was insistent. She pointed toward someone near the entrance, and I turned to see Harold Brennan entering the ballroom. He was dressed in a suit and tie, looking formal and nervous. My heart sank. Patricia hadn't mentioned that Harold would be attending the wedding. We hadn't included him in the seating chart or meal count, and his sudden appearance felt ominous. Patricia took the microphone from Miguel despite his protests, and the music stopped abruptly. The entire ballroom, 150 guests who had been dancing and celebrating, turned to look at her. "Ladies and gentlemen," Patricia announced, her voice carrying clearly through the sound system. "I hope you'll forgive me for interrupting this beautiful celebration." I looked at David, who appeared as confused as I felt. This wasn't part of our planned reception schedule. "Amanda and David's wedding has reminded me how precious love is," Patricia continued, "and how important it is to seize happiness when you find it." The guests were listening politely, probably assuming this was a planned speech from the mother of the groom. "Which is why I'm so excited to share some wonderful news with all of you tonight," Patricia said, her voice growing stronger and more confident. That's when Harold joined her at the microphone, and I saw the small jewelry box in his hand. "Harold proposed to me yesterday," Patricia announced triumphantly, and this seemed like the perfect moment to share our joy with family and friends. The silence that followed was deafening. 150 guests who had been celebrating David's and my marriage suddenly didn't know where to look or how to react. Patricia held up her left hand, displaying a substantial diamond ring that caught the ballroom lights. "We're engaged," she declared, as if this announcement at someone else's wedding reception was the most natural thing in the world. Harold looked deeply uncomfortable, clearly not having anticipated this public announcement. Several guests began murmuring to each other, and I could see confusion and disapproval on faces throughout the room. But Patricia wasn't finished. "I know this might seem sudden," she continued, still holding the microphone, "but when you find true love, you shouldn't wait. Harold and I have decided to have our wedding next month, and we hope you'll all be able to celebrate with us again." She smiled radiantly at the crowd, completely oblivious to the inappropriate nature of her announcement. "This is my special day too," she declared, raising the microphone like a toast. "To love at every age." That's when I saw our wedding planner, Elena Vasquez, walking quickly across the dance floor toward the DJ station. Elena was a consummate professional who had coordinated dozens of high-end weddings, and I could see from her expression that she was not pleased. Elena reached Patricia and spoke quietly but firmly into her ear. Patricia's confident smile faltered slightly, but she maintained her grip on the microphone. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Torres," Elena said, her voice now audible through the sound system. "But this is Amanda and David's wedding reception. They paid ton 35.0 for this celebration, and the microphone needs to be returned to the DJ for their planned reception events." The number, 35.0, hung in the air like a physical presence. Suddenly, every guest in the room understood exactly who had paid for the beautiful venue. The gourmet dinner they had just enjoyed, the open bar, the professional photography, and the elegant atmosphere. Patricia's face went pale as she realized what Elena had just announced to 150 people. "Amanda worked for months to plan this perfect day," Elena continued, gently but firmly taking the microphone from Patricia's hand, "and she deserves to have her reception proceed as planned." The silence in the ballroom was absolute now. Guests were looking between Patricia, Harold, David, and me, trying to process what had just happened. Harold stepped forward, his face red with embarrassment. "Patricia, we should sit down," he said quietly. "This isn't appropriate. This isn't appropriate." But the damage was done. Patricia had hijacked my wedding reception to announce her engagement, and in doing so, she had revealed her complete lack of respect for the day I had planned and paid for. I stood frozen on the dance floor, David's arm around my waist, staring at my new mother-in-law who had just turned my wedding reception into her engagement announcement. Elena handed the microphone back to Miguel and nodded toward him to resume the music. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced professionally, "let's continue celebrating Amanda and David's beautiful wedding day." But the magic was broken. Guests were whispering among themselves, some looking sympathetic toward me, others appearing shocked by Patricia's behavior. The joyful energy that had filled the room just minutes earlier had evaporated. David was the first to move, walking over to his mother with an expression I had never seen before, a mixture of anger, disappointment, and embarrassment. "Mom," he said quietly, "we need to talk." Patricia looked around the room, finally seeming to realize that her announcement had not been received as the joyful surprise she had intended. "I just thought it was a perfect time to share good news," she said defensively. Everyone was already gathered together. "This is Amanda's wedding day," David replied, his voice firm. "Her day. That she planned and paid for." The conversation was happening near the microphone, so several nearby guests could hear the exchange. "I was just sharing my happiness," Patricia insisted, but her voice was less confident now. That's when Maria, David's oldest sister, approached the group. I had always liked Maria. She was direct, practical, and seemed to understand her mother's tendency toward drama. "Mom, what you just did was completely inappropriate," Maria said bluntly. "You hijacked Amanda's wedding reception to announce your engagement. That's not sharing happiness, that's being selfish." Sophia and Carmen joined the conversation, both looking uncomfortable and embarrassed by their mother's behavior. "You could have announced your engagement at Sunday dinner, or called everyone individually, or planned your own celebration," Sophia added. "But taking over Amanda's reception was wrong. I appreciated their support, but I also knew this family confrontation was becoming part of the spectacle." Our wedding reception was turning into a family therapy session. Elena approached me discreetly. "Amanda, would you like me to make an announcement about resuming the reception activities? I can get the dancing started again and try to redirect the energy." I nodded gratefully. Elena had saved the day by calling out Patricia's behavior, and now she was trying to salvage what remained of our celebration. "Ladies and gentlemen," Elena announced through the sound system, "the bride and groom would like to invite everyone to the dance floor for the party portion of the evening. The bar is open, and we have a wonderful DJ ready to keep the celebration going." Gradually, guests began moving toward the dance floor, though the energy remained subdued. Many people approached David and me to offer quiet apologies for what had happened and to express their support. "That was completely out of line," my aunt whispered to me. "Your wedding was beautiful, honey. Don't let anyone take that away from you." David's cousin pulled him aside. "I'm sorry about Aunt Patricia, that was really inappropriate." Throughout the rest of the reception, Patricia and Harold remained seated at their table, barely speaking to anyone. The joy had gone out of Patricia's face, replaced by a sullen defensiveness that made it clear she still didn't fully understand why her announcement had been so wrong. The reception continued for another 3 hours, and Elena worked magic to restore some of the celebratory atmosphere. But the memory of Patricia's hijacking would forever be part of our wedding story. Near the end of the evening, as guests were beginning to leave, Patricia approached David and me one final time. "I hope you can forgive me," she said, though her tone suggested she still felt more misunderstood than genuinely remorseful. "I was just so excited about Harold, and I thought everyone would be happy for us." David looked at his mother with a sadness that was heartbreaking to witness. "Mom, today was supposed to be about Amanda and me. You turned it into something else." "I didn't mean to," Patricia replied. "I just thought it was a good time to share news." "You thought wrong," I said quietly. It was the first time I had spoken directly to Patricia since her announcement, and my words carried 3 years of accumulated frustration and hurt. Patricia looked surprised by my directness. Throughout our relationship, I had always been diplomatic, always tried to smooth over conflicts. "I spent a year planning this day," I continued. "I saved for months to pay for it. I wanted it to be perfect for David and me, and for our families to celebrate together." I paused, looking around the nearly empty ballroom that had been the scene of both my dreams and my disappointment. "What you did tonight showed me exactly how much you respect me and my relationship with your son. You don't see me as family. You see me as someone who took David away from you." Patricia started to protest, but I held up my hand. "Harold seems like a wonderful man, and I hope you're very happy together. But your engagement announcement belongs at your own celebration, not at mine. That was 8 months ago. David and I are happily married, living in a house we bought together in Albuquerque to be closer to his family. But the family dynamics have changed permanently. Patricia did marry Harold in a small ceremony 2 months after our wedding. David and I attended and wished them well. But the relationship between Patricia and me remains strained. She never truly apologized for hijacking our wedding reception. Instead, she maintains that she was just sharing good news and that families should be happy for each other. The lack of genuine remorse or understanding has made it difficult to rebuild trust. David's relationship with his mother has also changed. He sees her less frequently and maintains clearer boundaries about her involvement in our marriage. The wedding incident opened his eyes to patterns of behavior he had previously dismissed as just mom being mom. "I'm sorry I didn't protect you better," he told me, weeks after the wedding. "I should have seen this coming and prevented it." But I don't blame David. Patricia's behavior was her choice, and the consequences are hers to live with. The silver lining is that the rest of David's family rallied around us. His sisters, cousins, and extended family were horrified by Patricia's behavior and have made extra efforts to include me and make me feel welcomed. Elena, our wedding planner, became something of a hero in our circles. Her quick intervention and professional handling of the situation saved our reception from complete disaster. We've recommended her to dozens of friends, and she always mentions our wedding as an example of why clear boundaries are essential for family events. As for our marriage, we're stronger than ever. The wedding incident actually brought us closer together, forcing us to communicate more openly about family expectations and boundaries. We've also learned to find humor in the situation. At our first anniversary dinner, David raised his glass and said, "Here's to a year of marriage where nobody hijacked our special moments." "Yet," I replied, and we both laughed. The truth is, Patricia's selfishness revealed something important about character and respect. Some people see every occasion as an opportunity to center themselves, regardless of who gets hurt in the process. But it also revealed the importance of having people in your corner who will speak up when someone crosses the line. Elena's intervention, David's sister's support, and the guests' obvious disapproval all sent a clear message that Patricia's behavior was unacceptable. The woman who stood frozen on that dance floor 8 months ago learned that sometimes the most important moments in life are when you realize who truly supports you and who sees you as worth defending. Our marriage didn't start with the fairy tale reception I had planned, but it started with a clear understanding of our priorities and boundaries. And sometimes that's more valuable than perfect wedding photos. Have you ever had someone hijack your special moment for their own agenda? How did you handle family members who refused to respect boundaries? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about family drama, setting boundaries, and finding your voice when it matters most.